Awesome. All right. My name is Raghavendran Gururajan. I'm a program manager in the Hyper-V Replica team. With me is Charles Joy, who's going to be co-presenting some of the demos that you're going to see today. Welcome to the session right after lunch. So hopefully I'll keep you busy and thinking about your disaster recoveries. So let's start the presentation with a story. No DR presentation goes without a story, something like this, right? You have seen data centers burn down, Hurricane Sandy type of situations happen. I'm going to talk to you about a true story that I'm kind of related to. When Hurricane Sandy kind of hit New York City, I came to know about a friend of mine works for a New York City agency. I'll just leave that agency for now. And I was noticing a certain Facebook post started from him talking about how their data center got kind of in a trouble, and they started recovering from the flooding. And it started with very simple messages saying, hey, it looks like we're going to be down. And quickly it kind of escalated into a major disaster for them. And he was working pretty much on a 24/7, and he would post all the details in Facebook, and slowly every friend started cheering him up, him and his team. And it took 2-3 days, and eventually, there are some cool pictures. He would be going in the cop cars across the city. Mayor gave a full approval to get this thing up and running. So 3 days, 4 days, eventually they got it up and running, right? It was a great story, kind of a lot of kudos for him and his team. And I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you have kind of gone through that? Only 1, 2, 3? Okay, 4. All right. Actually, I don't want you to go through that experience. So this is a case study. When you get a chance, you folks should go and check it out. The team in Hyper-V Replica, after Sandy, got an email from this case study is by a company called Work IT Safe. You might know this is a system integrator based in New York City. And they managed a lot of the SMBs in that region. And they were able to kind of predict this, and then they were able to fail over all their customers. And the president of that company sent us an email saying, how easy it was, and it was a lot of great pleasure for us to hear directly from customers. So when you get a chance, I highly recommend you to go and read the case study. And in the rest of the presentations, hopefully you will hear and learn about Hyper-V Replica, and then how the 4 or 5 folks who kind of raised their hands can make their experience better. The session objectives, overview of Hyper-V Replica. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you have used Hyper-V Replica in one way or other? Okay, half the audience. How many of you are brand new to Hyper-V Replica? Okay, half the audience. All right. The challenge that we have, Hyper-V Replica has been out for a while, and it's been almost a year. We have a lot of data, a lot of presentations right from last TechEd. You should, for the folks who have never seen Hyper-V Replica, I highly recommend for you to kind of review some of those slides and the presentation talks from TechEd as well. In this presentation, I'll just touch on the overview, really give you the what Hyper-V Replica is, and then we'll go into infrastructure planning. Since the product has been out for a while, and we have heard a lot of feedback from customers and partners, and what we are doing to help you better plan your infrastructure for HVR. And then deployment considerations. This is somewhere I will touch base on. Typically, once you're done planning, how are you going to go through the initial replication? How do you monitor? How do you do the failover and failback? And how can you automate using PowerShell scripts? Some of the demos that Charles is going to show you will go through that. And last but not least, Windows 2012 R2, Hyper-V Replica V2, basically. And if you've seen some of the keynote demos and as well as the day one presentations by Jeff and Ben, you would have seen some sneak peeks of it. But we'll go into details, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer. So that's the agenda for rest of the day, or rest of the presentation. Let's get going. Overview, this, you would have seen it, but I'm going to go over and then give you, for a lot of the people who are new to Hyper-V Replica. It is an inbox solution, right? It comes with Windows Server 2012. As soon as you have the Hyper-V role, you get this part of the package. It's a very powerful tool that kind of tracks your changes that's happening in your Hyper-V VMs that on the primary, and then every 5 minutes, it ships that log across to your secondary or the replica site, and in an asynchronous manner, and then apply. So there is no additional software, none of that to install. It comes in box. DR scenarios, right? Hyper-V Replica is primarily built for DR in mind. All the previous presentations you have attended, you have heard this. When it comes to DR, there are 3 things that you want to think about, right? And every Compete product and every DR product supports that. One is you want to be able to be ready for DR, right? The test failover is a very key functionality that we support. Without interrupting your primary replica setup, you can spin over a test failover, connect to your clients, make sure that your DR is going well. Second thing is planned failover for various scenarios, right? For Hurricane Sandy type of scenarios, or you have compliance reasons where you are supposed to make sure that your DR site is working. Maybe you'll do once a month or once a quarter, or you're doing upgrade of your primary. You want to move your workload to your recovery and then come back. So that's what we call it as planned failover. And then, of course, on the unplanned failover, we'll go into details of whether you can fail over to the latest point in time, or you get access to various points in time in the past, up to 16 points that we support. The next one is app agnostic. The way I would put it is, if you have a VM and you have a pipe, we will get the data across to your replica site. We don't discriminate between what kind of workloads that you are running inside the VM. With that said, since the product has been out for a while, there are some confusions about the statements made on certain workloads such as SQL and AD type of workloads. We'll touch upon when we go into the deployment. But basically, it is app agnostic and moves your data from primary to recovery pretty quickly. And storage agnostic. I'm pretty sure you heard about this as well. And the primary, maybe your SAN situation, you have a SAN on your primary, and on the secondary, you have like a very simple DAS storage. Hyper-V Replica works, and you don't need a very expensive hardware on both sides. That tends to be case on certain DR scenarios or DR solutions that you might have seen in the market. And this is, again, another slice or dimension to look into it. It's simple, affordable, and flexible. Affordability, in the last presentations, the last year, the one thing I want to call out here is when the team designed this product, these are all some of the tenets, the vision that we had, and it is still true. I mean, in the last 2 days, I've met with various customers, partners, and the primary reason people don't have a secondary or a DR site is primarily cost, and they spend a lot of money in the primary side implementing really high expensive SANs, but they don't have a secondary site for DR purposes. And I asked them, hey, what happens if this thing fails over, if there is a disaster? It's pretty shocking. I mean, some of the admins, maybe you're in the audience, said, I may lose my job, or I'm working on it. And we make the affordability really, a key tenet when it comes to Hyper-V Replica. No additional cost in terms of licensing, no additional hardware required. And flexibility is another one. I talked about the storage flexibility on primary and replica. There are other things that you want to consider in your software architecture topology. You may have a cluster on your primary, and then you may not have a cluster similar setup on your recovery. Hyper-V Replica works regardless of what topology you have between your site, primary site and the replica site. And the deployment scenarios. And this is another thing that when the product was designed, these are there are a couple of scenarios that we really went after. The first one, we are looking at a decent sized company having 2 data centers. We expected them to use the second data center for DR and use the Hyper-V Replica to move your workloads. And the second one is small companies, SMBs, who don't have the means to create a DR site. They may be pairing with a hosting provider or a service provider. I gave you an example in the beginning of the presentation, Work IT Safe. They're basically a service provider. They work with hosters and various SMBs and bring the solutions together. Just quick show of hands. How many of you are hosting providers, service providers in this audience? Okay, a dozen or so. Okay. If you have any specific questions with respect to how Hyper-V Replica is working, I'd be more interested to talk to you after the presentation as well. So these are the 2 key deployment scenarios, and I'm happy to say that after talking to various people over the last year or so, this seems to still stick, and this is how Hyper-V Replica is actually used in the field today. So with the overview out of the way, I'm going to kind of go into the infrastructure planning. Since the product has been out for a while, almost a year, we constantly talk to various TAP customers, early adopters, and also our partners. And the next set of slides is primarily to what we have done to help you move the needle when it comes to planning, right? I'm going to give it away in this slide, what I'm going to talk about. The biggest thing that we hear from customers is that how can we plan for our infrastructure, whether it is storage needs, network needs, or the CPU memory, and with respect to any server product, right? I mean, not necessarily Hyper-V Replica. Any server product you take, infrastructure, the capacity planning is very key, right? And we knew that, and we have done a lot of benchmarks on various workloads, right? One is whether it is SQL, Exchange, web, file server, and we used all of that to give you as a data point up until now and let you extrapolate from it, right? Saying, okay, if you are running a SQL workload, this is what we did, you kind of figure out. But end of the day, your workload is the most critical one. What we have done is a TPC kind of benchmark, and you may not have that set up, right? It always, we ended with a star saying that it depends on what your workload looks like. And without any delay, I am going to show you a tool that we just released. How many of you know about this tool that we just released? Okay. So we just released it last week. There is a blog post on the VM, wherever you see the HVR blogs. And also, I provided the link in the presentation that you can go and then download. This tool should help you take this tool, take it back to your environment, run it in the environment that you are trying to plan for, whether to get answers for your storage IOPS, network requirements, CPU and memory. And let's take a quick look at the demo of the tool, and then I'll kind of walk you through the output and what it kind of how to read the output for you. The tool is very simple, folks. There is only, it's an exe, it's a standalone exe, it is free, you can download, there is a documentation that comes with it. And let me just run through this tool. I won't finish it because you are typically supposed to run the tool in a time frame that represents your workload. Right? Here I'm going to run through, first step is to, and the tool can be run from anywhere, right? You can run it from your laptop. All you need to do is point to your primary server, point to your replica server, and let's do this. This is my primary server. And the next input it's going to ask for is, what is your estimated WAN bandwidth, right? So you should know this number. I'm just going to give a number over here saying a 10 Mbps line that I have, and how long you want to collect the metrics for. This tool is very, you can run it in your environment. It is not very intrusive. The only requirement we have on this one is you do not do the replication by the time you run this tool. You basically have your VMs churning. You did not enable replication, and you use this tool. This tool is going to basically listen into your environment, primarily looking for various perf counters. So it's not at all intrusive. So you can run it for however long you think it represents the right workload, so that the results it gives you is more accurate, so that you can plan for your in your environment. So let's say I'm going to run it for 60 minutes. Typically, you would run it for maybe half a day or 8 hours. And what it's going to do is, now it's going to go talk to the primary server. It's going to iterate through all the VMs that are out there. What here it is saying is you need to have the VMs running. Obviously, that's how we know what the churn is it's causing. And the first input it is going to ask for is a temp location. This is where we basically create a temporary VM of 10 gig in size, and we are going to do an initial replication on that. And this is the location that we will use. The reason for doing that is for us to understand, even though you gave a WAN bandwidth requirement, what you think is your estimated WAN bandwidth, we actually do the IR. We want to calculate, after some time, we cancel that, we clean up that environment. But it allows us to really understand what is the real bandwidth that you're getting, right? So I'm going to put a location. And in this particular setup, I'm using a cert-based auth to do the replication. And between these two servers, I'm just going to pick a cert. And you would pick the VMs that you really care about to be part of this particular study, right? And that's pretty much it. Once I hit next, it's going to start churning for the next 1 hour, keep monitoring for the perf counters, do the IR that I mentioned to analyze your network available bandwidth, and eventually it will give you a report that we will go into. So I'll let it run and come back to the PowerPoint where I will walk you through how the report is going to look like, how to read the report. So the first one, before I go into storage IOPS, and network, there are a couple of other things that you should be aware of. The report also gives you the CPU, memory, all the requirements. But you should know, if you know already a Hyper-V replica or you're new to it, Hyper-V replica doesn't consume a lot of, it's not memory or CPU intensive. It's about 3%, 1 to 3% is what it would require. And so I'm just going to skip those two data points for you right now. So let's talk about storage. These are the 3 big things typically customers worry about as part of the planning process. The first one says, and each one of them we are going to talk about in the context of your primary server and then in the context of your replica server, right? The first one says that the way I want you to read this slide, read the second line first, right? It says total churn across all the VMs or the VMs that I picked for the 5 minutes. It's about 1.2 gigs, and the additional storage required for the primary, it says it's the double the amount. The main reason is if you, the way Hyper-V Replica works is, as I mentioned, on the primary, it keeps track of the changes that's happening, and then every 5 minutes, the log is forked, and then it is sent across to the to the replica node, right? So we assert that it's going to take you 5 minutes, perhaps. So during that time, the next log is going to start accumulating, right? So that's why we kind of give you this number saying that on primary at any given time, you need this much of storage requirement. And then when it comes to the replica side of things, the things you need to be aware of is what's the base VHT. That is a very straightforward, what's your VHT, and then what it needs on the other side. We know it's in this particular report that we used is a 60 gig is required on the other side. And there are two things you want to know about when it comes to on the replica side. Hyper-V Replica as a product supports you to only maintain the latest point in time, or you can also pick a point in time, recovery points, up to like 15 recovery points you can store at a 1 hour interval, right? So the first one is the middle row. It says if you only want to preserve the latest recovery points, right? It's the same as what you have seen at the top, right? The 5 minutes in the primary, the log is created, it kind of moved over, and it's the same amount you need on the replica side. Whereas when it comes to you want to save the more additional recovery points, in 2012, what we do is we use the Hyper-V Replica snapshot. We changed this architecture in 2012 R2. I will get to that when we get to that slide. But for 2012, we used Hyper-V Replica snapshot. And when Hyper-V Replica snapshot is created, when you want to create additional recovery points, the way we had to format when the snapshot is created, and eventually the amount of data that we need is roughly 10% of your VMs. But keep in mind that that number comes from a lot of studies, a lot of benchmarks that we have done internally on various workloads. And we have also seen this is the average number, 10% of your VHT, and for every additional recovery point. But there are some benchmarks such as IO meters, which are very intensive, and the writes happen all over the place. We have also seen on extreme scenarios up to 20% of that. But this is a pretty good number for most of the workloads that you would encounter. So that's the storage. And when it comes to storage IOPS, that's another area that you want to consider. And the first line says the IOPS measured during the sampling interval before. This is primarily reading the based on the perf counters that we monitor for the writes that are happening, and then we report on that. And initial replication, this is an area that we have about, again, based on some of the work that we have done internally, we are able to kind of project a multiplication factor of 4, and that's essentially what you need in terms of during initial replication. And after that, a steady state of delta replication, we call it as DR. Delta replication is the every 5 minutes that the data that goes across is what's needed on the primary. And then you would see on the replica side, when it comes to the replica side, we make sure that there is a little bit of overhead in terms of when you read the log file, when you apply to the base VHT. So that's why you're seeing. And similar to when you have a multiple recovery, for the latest recovery points, it's just a 2-factor. But when it comes to multiple recovery points, again, we have the way we use the Hyper-V snapshots requires a little bit more IOP requirements for your scenarios. Last but not least, this is one of those areas that we spent a lot of time in the last year since Hyper-V Replica has been released. And we talked to various customers, various partners, and network requirements is something that we hear very often, how to optimize the Hyper-V Replica traffic going from primary to your replica, and how to configure it. So the top line says, this is the number. In my demo, I gave 10 Mbps. In this particular one, it's 155. This is a best case scenario. You have more bandwidth than what you need. This 33 meg, the way it is calculated is, in the beginning, right? You know what it takes to create the data every 5 minutes. It's 1.2 gig, and we do a straight math to figure out how much for average network bandwidth you need for 5 minutes, right? And it comes down to 33. And the last line that your 33 Mbps is what is required, but you do have 155. But you will do a lot of these planning only when you have less bandwidth available in your situation, and then it'll become interesting on how you're going to configure, your IR, how you're going to stagger your IR. We'll talk about it when we get to the deployment scenarios. And the last line says ideal number of active parallel transfers, right? For every transfer, when we create a TCP connection, the goal is to identify the right number, so we get the transfers going in parallel. At the same time, whether we send in sequence or in parallel, the goal is to keep the RPO of 5 minutes. And the product out of the box, it uses a default setting of 3. And in this particular situation, based on the setup that we had, it is recommending for you to go tweak this number to be 4. And this is a registry setting. I just want to know, for the folks who have already used a Hyper-V Replica, can you show me a hand, like how many of you are aware of this? You've used it? Okay, just 1, 2. Have you used successfully? Okay, great. So a couple of them, and this is a good area for you to kind of look into. I'm just going to kind of continue on the networking aspects of it. So we talked about the learnings that we have done in the last year is that this is a key area that most of the customers struggle with or want to control. There are lots of things that they have on their network, whether it's not just Hyper-V Replica traffic, right? People ask questions like, hey, can I use a particular NIC for Hyper-V Replica? Various ways, but end of the day, what we realized is people want to control the amount of data that Hyper-V Replica sends across between their two sites, right? And we talked about this is a known factor, right? You have the ability. This is not a Hyper-V Replica feature per se. It is at the Windows operating system level. The networking supports causing mechanisms, either by subnet or by the port, right? And I just want to illustrate this. I'm going to do a quick demo to showcase that this thing works and you can make use of this functionality as long as the only requirement you have is specify the port, and I'll show you how this thing is going to work, and it is easy to illustrate through a demo. So the capacity planner is still running. That it's going to run for an hour. So let me switch over to a new node. So what I have here is, let me show you the Hyper-V manager. There are two nodes in here, and there is a simple 10 gig VM that I have created. And in the second node, it's empty. I'm going to create a replication, initiate the replication. And during the IR, initial replication, is going on, I'm going to enable the QoS policy. And then you will see that the data that is sent across really reflects based on the QoS policy that we are going to set. For that, I have two windows over here. I apologize if you guys in the back can't see it. So on the top is a couple of PowerShell commands that I have to initiate the replication and apply the throttling policies. And then at the bottom, you're looking at the perfmon. And what I want, so let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and get the replication started, and or enable replication. And let's do the initial replication now. And I want you to kind of pay attention to the amount of data that's going to go over here, the send. It's about, it'll average and peak at about 90 Mbps, right? And you will see the graph really reflect that. And let it run for a while. And if I go back to the Hyper-V replica, and it's going to say it's sending initial replication. So far, so good, right? Let's go back to our, so here you see that the peak has started. It's using about 90 Mbps to send the initial replication. I'll go ahead and get this policy started. And you will notice that right away the value kind of comes down, and it will maintain as long as this policy is in place, right? And one thing I mentioned, if you go to the replica and its settings, I want to show you that the port in which it is going at. So here, 8084 is the port that we have enabled for the replica, and that's what I used in the PowerShell to enable this particular policy, right? It's down now. So if I go ahead and release the policy, it'll go back up. It's asking, yes, go ahead and remove the policy, and then it should go back up. Okay? So this is a very simple but very easy to achieve for your scenarios, and a couple of our customers are able to, and there is a very detailed white paper that's available if you want to understand more details about this as well. Let me know, and I'll kind of point you to that. Switching back to the presentation, we just went through the demo. And again, sticking with the network topic for a moment, this is another area where we enable compression by default. You have the ability to do it. And a lot of the time, the questions that come to us is, what about WAN optimizers? HVR, Hyper-V Replica is basically uses the WAN and to get the data across, and typically that's how we see the setup, right? And we have partnered with Riverbed, which is they create WAN devices, and we have done a very detailed study. And I have a pretty graph, and there is a white paper. This is where you can get a lot of details. We have Brett from Riverbed in the audience. We can take questions at the end if you have any specific questions for this particular study that we have done. What you're seeing here is the one in the blue is your LAN traffic, right? And it's about close to 1.82 terabytes is what we are pumping. We did this study over weeks, very detailed workloads of a typical branch office, head office, using various line of business applications, mail, etc. And the WAN throughput, though, that you're seeing here is 86 gigs with a savings of 1.8 terabytes. With the TCP/IP kind of protocol level optimizations that the Riverbed does, as well as the dedupe functionality that they enable, it kind of works very seamlessly without any work on Hyper-V Replica or any of the work on the Riverbed. It just works out of the box. That's something you should be aware of. And there are other, in the forums, I have seen customers using other optimizers as well. And that gives a clear message that it works across various vendors. Okay, so we kind of talked about infrastructure, how once you get a plan, you know what your storage requirements are, you know what your network requirements are. Hopefully, the capacity planner will help you. One thing I would ask for is, please send us feedback. The capacity planner works only on 2012. We are working on revving it for 2012 R2 because the architecture has changed, and I'll talk about it in the slides coming up. So your infrastructure is done. Let's talk about deployment, right? And I'm going to try and balance out the audience is 50-50. You have already seen HVR, or audience is like never seen HVR. I'm not going to do the demo of how the HVR functionalities work, but the areas that we thought, based on our learnings in the last year, without repeating the content from the last year, what all things you should be thinking about. So the first one is, when it comes to deployment, the initial replication, right? And you know that there are two ways to do the initial replication. Once you establish the replication, you can do through the online using your network. And the second one is what we call is out of band, where you can take your VHDs, put it in a USB disk of some sort, and then ship it across, and then bring it on the replica site. And then we do a smart IR based on the data available on both sides. And maybe the key point here I want to make here is you have the tools like Capacity Planner that's going to tell you what the initial IR requirements are in terms of storage. And also, when you do the network transfer, you have the ability to understand how long it's going to take. And you need to make a judgment call on whether you're going to do the staggered initial replication using network, or it is beneficial, but you're going to take the hit on administrators kind of doing some back office kind of thing to ship the product through a disk and then load it. So you have the ability to decide using a combination of the one we talked about. The backup and restore with resync, this is another learning for me, is the product is, a lot of the customers use backup, maybe using DPM, and they do want to go to DR as a domain. And so possibly you have backups that you can use, very similar to the out-of-band IR functionality. The next one is, this is a very frequently asked question. It's kind of annoying for a lot of the IT admins that manage large number of VMs. And if you have noticed, the replica side, the folder structure is all GUID, right? And you as an admin, you want control over what we call it as flexible placement of how your VMs go into what location. The message that I'm trying to give here is, yes, it is not out of the box, you cannot specify the location, but we have PowerShell way of creating your locations that you really care about. The 3 steps that usually you do to achieve this, there's a very detailed blog article that's written about how to achieve this, and you have sample code in the Hyper-V Replica blog on how to achieve this. Basically, once you establish replication, don't start the IR, right? Just stagger the IR by scheduling for some time later on. Go to your replica, create a storage migration. And this is a one-time operation. You can use the PowerShell scripts to do the storage migration, and then let the IR go. After that point, you're set your locations or where you wanted it to be, instead of pretty uneasy long GUIDs. And so let's talk about what are all the things that you want to monitor. This is more useful for folks who have never seen the areas, how we go about giving the right information for you about the replication health is what I'm trying to highlight here. The last synchronized time, average replication latency, and the performance counters. These are various things that we look into, but one example that I want to show you here, this is a health monitor that's in a good state, normal state. Here, what I want to bring your attention to is the last synchronized at. The key things that we are looking for is, are we missing the RPO guidance that we have given? Are we going beyond 5 minutes of data loss for you, right? In this case, and then the successful replication cycles. This is another metrics that we monitor for. And if you go beyond 20% regressions and we start throwing errors or warnings for your attention, right? And at some point, we will take the replication health to critical if your, for some reason, your replica site is down, your network is down for longer periods of time. And that example, I just have another example of it. So in this case, we are unable to maintain the replica hasn't happened in the last 10 minutes, the last thing that you're looking into. And then the replication cycles missed more than 20% of its threshold. And one thing you might have seen if you have used it, the event viewers are kind of linked into this, and you can go directly to where the issues are happening. And whatever I'm showing you in UI, you should also know that you can get these statuses through PowerShell as well. So you have, if you have a large number of VMs that you're administering, you should be able to write scripts to manage and monitor your environment. And the next one is the key point I want to make about when you miss the synchronization for a longer periods of time. If we get to a stage where 50% of your logs is kind of 50% of your VHT, and we know that we changed the status to be a resync required. How many of you have kind of experienced the resync required state for various reasons? One or two. And I know a lot of customers that I directly talk to. The key point I want to make here is Hyper-V Replica kind of very resilient to network outages and other issues. And when the systems come back up, network comes back up, it will catch up over time. When it comes to resync, you have the ability to schedule it. That's what I want to highlight over here. Because resync, we do the checksum kind of computations on both sides. It is a little bit of resource intensive, and you may run into issues if you're running in the middle of the day where a lot of the customers or your users are using your system. So I want to kind of draw your attention to whether the default is automatically is done at that certain point. This default is something you want to keep an eye on. So VM migration, this is another area that, just to give you reinforcing the message, when it goes back to what we were talking about in terms of how simple, flexible the product is. When you move your, let's say VM, you had a clustered environment in your primary, and then the VM moves over, the product continues to work, and replication, as soon as the VM hits the new node, all the config data, all the associated log, everything gets shipped as part of the migration. And then the Hyper-V Replica picks up from where it left off and continues. And when it comes to on the replica side, when you move things over, the only area that we want to kind of you to pay attention to is make sure that your primary server is authenticated to talk to the new host. Then everything should continue to work for you without any hitch. And this is another FAQ that when I go through a lot of these questions when I was preparing for this session, I want to give you as much new data as possible. And this is one area that this backup, what I am talking about is specifically DPM. If you are using DPM as your backup strategy, and the question, there were a lot of confusions around, hey, should I be backing up from the Replica server, or should I be backing up from the primary server? And the recommendation, and you have a TechNet article kind of going into the details, is we want you to kind of focus on your backup on the primary, mainly because in the Replica side, we may be applying the logs, and the HVR functionality is kicking in when you are doing the backup, and you may not get the high integrity data backups that you may desire. So there is an article reflecting on this particular issue that confuses a lot of the customers. Guest dependencies, there are about 3 things I want to talk about. When we talked about Hyper-V Replica is application agnostic, right? But when it comes to Linux, like I said, we don't care about whether it is Windows or Linux. It does work. The only functionality that in Windows 2012, the guest IP injection only worked for Windows. But I'm happy to announce that we did a IC component release just recently. This is the link, and now the guest IP injection also works for Windows 2012. So you can just download this, and then if you are using Linux VMs, and it should work for you. Just curiosity question, how many of you use Linux kind of workloads with Hyper-V Replica? Great. Support for virtualized ADs. This is a support statement kind of confused and some of the customers, and if you look at the forums where customers discuss about, hey, now if I go to Microsoft, it says the AD, virtualized AD is not supported in conjunction with Hyper-V Replica, right? What I want to clarify here is that we kind of worked with it, the right groups, and if you are using Windows 2012, AD, and if you want to use virtualized AD, it is supported, and the documentation is updated in Microsoft sites. The background of this is, folks, in 2008 R2 and 2012, the Hyper-V introduced the VGen ID functionality, where if you are going through a Hyper-V snapshot type of event, in 2012, Hyper-V Replica and the virtualized AD is able to handle that change in time. When you're going back in time, it's able to handle and recover from it. Whereas 2008 R2, you ran into issues where the updated sequence rollback happens, when that's a number that AD maintains for every object in AD. So when you go back in time, the two ADs can go out of sync, and then you end up doing a very detailed debugging of, demoting your AD and then going back into enabling debugging this issue. You don't have that problem in 2012. It should be very clear to this audience. And similar to that, the SQL workload, if you know the SQL architecture, typically you keep data and the log files in 2 different VHDs. And in SQL, everything is written to the log file first before it goes to the data. And does HVR know about this, and then does it provide the app consistency when it comes to SQL type of workloads? And we recently updated this particular guidance also. It does work, provided you have this registry key enabled. And this is a detailed write-up is also available. When you enable this, we make sure that the log file, and when we take the snapshots, we honor this way SQL kind of manages its rights. And when it comes to failover, so we talked about initial replication, the monitoring aspects, and certain new things about guest specific behaviors. I just want to kind of switch over to the failover. There are, like I mentioned in the beginning, you have 3 types of failovers that we support. The test failover is where you're basically in an isolated environment, making sure that your DR setup is working, ready to go, and not waiting for the DR to hit. Planned failover, 2 or 3 different reasons you might be doing for compliance, you're upgrading your primary server, or just want to test out for whatever reasons that you want to bring your primary down, and then you want to run it in the recovery for a while. The things that you want to think about, there are a lot of details around how you can use the static IP, DHCP. If you have a static IP and then during failover you can use it as a IP injection, or you can use DHCP and then refresh your DNS, or you can use the network virtualization. There are multiple things that you have to do to get your failover. And if you're using the planned failover, you typically plan for your failback as well, right? You can enable reverse replication, and depending on your needs, and then you can bring it back. If it's a compliance, you want to run it for a couple of days, but you don't want to lose the changes. You do a reverse replication, so when you want to fail back, it's ready to go. So you do a lot of those functionalities. And last but not least, when it goes to after a failover, when your primary comes up, you need to think about how you would restrict your primary VMs to start up. There are a lot of steps you have to worry about when you are in stress. When it comes to deployment, when you're planning initial replication, all those things, you have lots of time. But when it comes to failover, whether it is an unplanned, planned test, you are in stress mode, and you don't want to be dealing with all these things in one-off situation. So we're going to kind of show you how you can use PowerShell to kind of automate a lot of these functionalities. And I'll invite Charles to show you a demo of how you can use PowerShell for some of this functionality in conjunction with System Center Orchestrator. Charles?
Thank you. All right. Good transition there. I'm going to hop on to, I thought I was going to. There it is. All right, so how many people know or have worked with Orchestrator in the past in the room? A couple? PowerShell? Everybody. Right.
Everybody.
All right. All right, so what I have here, I'm not a console kind of guy. I like to automate things as much as possible. I don't like to click on things if I have to. So what I've developed is a series of runbooks that leverage the PowerShell that's available for Hyper-V Replica. And the full demo takes quite a while, so I'm going to show you a simple demo, talk through some of the stuff, and then if you want to see the full demonstration, I have that available on my blog. And I have information about the blog if you want to come up and get that afterwards. I have stickers and stuff. So let's move on with that. So before we start, I just want to show you that I ran this as a test, the full thing, to show him earlier. So I wanted to show you that these are the 3 machines that I've been dealing with. We're only going to be dealing with one at a time for this demonstration, or just one for this failover and failback. But you can see they have varying times, because in my full presentation, my full demo, I have them start up in a specific order based on some properties that are specific to the VM. So I just want to show you that before I go ahead and ruin the nice timestamps that they have. So everything for this runbook based on a couple high-level runbooks, and then sub-process runbooks, and then a whole bunch of PowerShell that's baked in that does all the work. So this HVR demo and test runbook will actually initiate the same exact shared runbook that does planned failover for virtual machines that the full System Center Story runbook does. So I'm going to kick it off, and I'll dive into it as it's running. So I'm just going to hit run, and this is feeding a bunch of variables that have data for replication port, for what's the initial primary server, all that stuff that you could see there. So resolution is big enough so we can see at the same time. But SPF1, the one that's highlighted, will be shutting off on the primary server, which is 459, and it will be planned failover as all the actions I've put together for that, and it will end up starting on the 460 server. Now, while it's doing that, why don't I hop into where it is right now. So it's currently invoking this guy. And this is just all the steps. I've broken them out into their individual pieces, so they each runbook is a bit of PowerShell. So it's not just one giant PowerShell script that's hard to consume. It's a bunch of small PowerShell scripts that you can use individually if you want. So, and this is the library of all of those. So you can see stop primary server VM is running. So if we go into VM process stop VM, it's just some simple PowerShell. And the PowerShell itself, if you've worked with Orchestrator PowerShell before, you have to do a little bit of magic. I'm actually using invoke command because these are 64-bit targets. So, but there's the bit of PowerShell, and then I'm passing variables in. If we go back to Hyper-V, you can see that it is off, and a whole bunch of other stuff will be starting up, or not a whole bunch. It's already running on this side. So this has been failed over to the 460 machine, and I could do whatever I want with it when it's over there. I have scripts that run once it's started up to get stuff from the registry via PowerShell and schedule tasks. You can find out more about that if you want to on the blog post. But the runbooks, if you just wanted to test functionality, they basically they will check to see if VMs are enabled for replication, and if they aren't, they'll enable them, do the initial replication over the network, of course, because this is automated, and then kick everything off. Now, I don't want to leave that over because we want to plan for failback, so all the runbooks are smart enough that if I kick this off again, well, assuming that's done, yeah, it's done. If I kick this off again, it's going to fail it back because it checks what's the primary server, where is it coming from, where is it going, and then it'll fail it right back over. So in a matter of moments, it'll stop running on 460, start running on 459, and I've essentially failed it back. Some of the other stuff I've baked into this is the ability that you could, in the variable, say, I want to do a test. So at that point, it doesn't stop anything on the primary server. It just spins up what's available on the replica server as a test, and then you can stop that as well. So, but the full System Center HVR story, which I've demoed at MMS and is online, uses Service Manager and VMM to help deal with failing over entire cloud's worth of, so basically more than one VM at a time. That's a bit more complex, and the runbooks are a little bit more involved. So I'm not going to demo that for you, but it's available via video. In fact, if you go to website aka.ms building clouds, which is, I'll give you stickers if you want, and go to automation track. And I actually have a greatest hits blog reference guide now for all my stuff, and you go down to Hyper-Replica with System Center Plan Failover, 56 example runbooks available for you today, 2 different scenarios. I showed you one today. There's a video baked in. You could go to everything that I referenced when I was learning how to do this and all that. So, but that should, yep, it's off there. It's running back over here, and that's about it. So.
Great. Thanks, Charles. We'll go into so far we talked about Windows 2012, infrastructure planning, deployment, how you can use the PowerShell way of creating your failover scenarios. Now let's just shift focus and go into Windows Server 2012 R2. The cat is out of the bag with various demonstrations that happened throughout the conference. Ben, Jeff talked about this, but I'll try to take it to a next level. in the morning, how many of you attended the HRM session, Hyper-V Recovery Manager, that Manoj did this morning? Okay, so I want to kind of bring you into 2012 R2 thinking. On the left-hand side, what you're seeing is what is 2012. We started DR as a platform, and Hyper-V Replica is one of the foundational functionalities that really helped in there. And in 2012 R2, we're investing in the cloud scale DR, and you should know that Microsoft as a Windows Server and System Center, and then on top of Hyper-V Recovery Manager provides you the most cloud scale DR that you can expect. And for Hyper-V Recovery Manager, you should definitely check out the session details that happened this morning. But I'll give you a really quick overview of where Hyper-V Recovery Manager sits in, right? When you have a large site, you have a primary site and your secondary site, well, the functionality that we support today, HRM is basically an Azure service sitting in Azure. It's an orchestrator sitting in Azure. It manages pretty much only your metadata about your primary and secondary. No data goes to Azure. It uses the Hyper-V Replica, both Hyper-V Replica 2012 and 2012 R2 features to move data across your data centers at a very high level. Let's go into what is exciting in 2012 R2. I'm very, very privileged to talk about it. We've done a lot of work in this 1 year. The first one is the 30-second replication. So you know that 2012 supports 5-minute replication frequency, and we have heard quite a bit from our enterprise and various customers saying we should be able to send more data if our environment and infrastructure allows us to do. We heard that, and that's essentially what brings you down to almost near synchronized replication. And also on top of it, we let you kind of manage this knob, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, and 15 minutes. Whereas in 2012, we didn't let you change that knob at all. And I know that there are some people would like to pick their own areas, but based on the studies and based on the various workloads that we know about, we believe these 3 things will meet the most of the needs that's out there. Extended replication, this is another key area that we have invested in. And in 2012, your replication works between only point A to point B, host A to host B. And we have extended that functionality to take from Replica, you can forward the traffic to another node. The key area that this plays in is if you have a metro DR kind of scenario where you have 2 data centers, maybe 100 miles apart, and then you have a 3rd data center that's across the continent for really the offsite kind of scenario, you want to make sure this type of functionality is available for you in your product. We support that in 2012 R2. Linux VM enhancements, this is something specifically I want to call out. In 2012, we did not support the file system consistency. We do support it going forward in 2012 R2. And a couple of other areas that I want to kind of touch upon, not necessarily Linux. There is an online resizing. You might have seen the Hyper-V enhancements. Hyper-V Replica also supports online resize that you should know about. And also, Hyper-V supports Gen 1 and Gen 2, Generation 2 VMs. And 2012 R2 also supports, Replica also supports Gen 2 VMs. Last but not least, its upgrade is super important. 2012 has been out only for 1 year, and it will be unfair to ask the customers to just kind of scrap everything that they have and then go to 2012 R2. This is a very key tenet for us to make sure that if you have 2012 investments and you can replicate to 2012 R2. The only obvious caveat is that you won't get the 30-second replication until you go everything to 2012 R2. So let's jump into some demos. And that's going to talk about how the 30-second replication works within the product. And I'm going to show you another demo about the extended replication. How many of you have seen the demos from the first day? OK, fair amount of folks have seen it. All right, this may be a repeat, but I'll take a different approach to the demo. So the first demo I'm going to show you, let's go into the node that I care about. So you have 3 nodes, 16, 18, and 21. Think of it like A, B, and C. C is the tertiary or the extended replication. The 16, the first server, is your primary. And you'll notice that I have about 5 or 6 VMs that are running. And I've been running these VMs for almost 10 days right now. And I want to show you that these VMs are in here. The primary and the replica is the middle. And if I go into the node B, and then you will see that these VMs also get replicated across to the tertiary node or the extended node. And I want you to look at some of the settings. Between A and B is what I have used the near sync replication frequency. So here it is set to 30 seconds. And if I go to the other node and then take any of these VMs and look at the settings, it should be 5 minutes from point B to point C. And actually, I have 15 minutes. So to illustrate, there is a little tool that we have written. And what this tool is doing is, think of it like your primary site is Tukwila. And for folks who may not know the geography in the US, Tukwila is a city in Washington state. And then Quincy is about 100 miles apart within the same state. And Virginia being on the East Coast. That's essentially what we are trying to illustrate here. So between Tukwila and Quincy, right? Think of it like you wanted a near sync replication, and then between Quincy and Virginia, you may be using a longer RPO of 15 minutes. And we kind of keep looking at the last synchronized time, and you will see this the screen flicker as soon as the last synchronized time is picked up. And at any given time, the node in Quincy should not be more than 30 seconds. And it works like a charm, and we have been using this kind of tools to test at a very high scale. The particular VMs or the machine that I'm running kind of handles only about 6 VMs. So, but you will see the load characteristics kind of increase with your infrastructure. So this is the first one I want you to see. And we'll take the second demo I want to show you is I have a Linux VM that is sitting in my primary. I want to move a failover, a planned failover, all the way to the tertiary node. And let's see how it goes. And let's really quickly look at the VM, make sure it is run what it looks like. And it's going to get started. So let me do this. So this is a VM. I'm going to show you that this can fail over all the way to the tertiary node. So to do that, first thing I need to do is, because it's a planned failover, I need to shut down this VM. And let me go ahead and shut down this. All right. And let me go to a couple of scripts that I had written. And let's start the planned failover. And let's say, yes, I want to move. Now I'm moving from, preparing to move from A to B. And then this is the middle node. It should come back with prompt. I'll say yes. And then eventually it's going to fail over to the third node. And this is a planned failover. And once this one completes, I should be able to go to the node 3, and then hydrate the VM for after it's a failover. So let's see. Okay, so now let me go. I can start the VM over here, or I'll just go to the UI, and let's do a refresh. And it may complain that the replication health is in a warning state. Probably not. It may complain because if I don't establish a reverse replication, it'll give you a warning. But it should be able to connect and okay, so the replication. So this particular script didn't complete? Yeah. I don't think this one completed yet. It should come back. Oh, I lost my VPN. Let me try really quick again. It's been a challenge. So far, the demo guards have really helped. So let's see the last stretch we are on. So once I get that, I think I also included the hash when I executed. So once that goes through, it should fail over, plan failover should complete, and you should be able to hydrate in the tertiary node. So with that, I will go to the slides really quick. My VPN connection is getting established again. This is my last slide. From a positioning perspective, right, I want you to be aware of, this is again a very frequently kind of asked question, what should I think about when it comes to Hyper-V Replica and other solutions that are out there? Hyper-V Replica, I'm not going to go through each and every one of that, but I do believe there are a couple of areas that you should be left with. One is, it is a DR product, and you should think about for your DR solutions. And the last line in here is very key. The System Center and HRM, right? Microsoft, any product, like any Microsoft product, when it comes out, you're going to have the primitives, APIs, PowerShell kind of interfaces that's available to you. And if you are a PowerShell kind of guru, you would go about using that. But we also always invested in System Center when it comes to scale, enterprise scale, cloud readiness. That's where we are investing. Starting to invest in HRM. You have seen the initial release, the details that Manoj talked about this morning. And you should expect a very ongoing investment in HRM when it comes to large-scale deployments and other replication providers and so on and so forth. So that's essentially concludes my presentation. And these are some of the related contents that you should be aware of. Please, please, please take time to give us feedback. This is a very challenging presentation to kind of mix and match. 50% of the audience knows about the product, 50% have used the product. So we try to give you as much as possible new data, as well as what for folks who don't know, kind of able to absorb the presentation. But to make it better, your feedback is much needed. Thank you.